Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer on Chapter 3, Money and Credit. We're going to unpack the really fascinating story of how human societies moved from just, simply swapping items with each other, all the way to the massive, complex banking systems we use today. Because understanding money isn't just about knowing what's in your wallet, it's about understanding the actual engine that drives our entire economic reality. So let's dive right in.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the shift from barter to money, then look at modern money in banking. After that, we'll examine the two faces of credit, compare formal versus informal lenders, and finally, look at empowering the rural poor.
All right, part 1, from barter to money, and how we solved the exchange problem.
So, have you ever actually stopped to wonder why we use money for pretty much everything? To really get why it's so crucial, you kind of have to imagine a world entirely without it. A society where you have to directly trade what you make for the exact things you need. This is the good old barter system.
Picture this. You've got a shoe manufacturer who desperately wants some wheat, and a farmer who grows it. In a pure barter economy, they can only make a deal if each of them wants exactly what the other one has. But what if the farmer's perfectly fine on shoes right now? What if he actually just needs some clothes instead? Boom! The whole transaction hits a brick wall.
Economists actually have a name for this massive headache. They call it the double coincidence of wants. For a successful exchange to happen, both parties absolutely must agree to buy and sell each other's specific commodities. Without this magical coincidence, trade basically breaks down, making everyday business incredibly tedious and inefficient.
And here's where human ingenuity steps in, the invention of standardized money. By introducing something like this 2,500-year-old punch-marked coin, money acts as a vital intermediate step. It completely wipes out that double coincidence problem. Now the shoemaker just sells his shoes for money and uses that cash to buy wheat from literally anyone. Problem solved. As societies grew more complex, so did their cash. The history of money is actually full of these amazing curiosities. Over time, currencies evolved into intricately designed pieces, like this gorgeous ancient Gupta coin right here. These historical items vividly reflect the social and economic power of the empires that minted them.
Fast forward to the present day. Today, we're mostly using paper notes and coins for everyday stuff. But here's the wild part. Unlike cattle or grains used in ancient barter, modern currency has absolutely zero inherent use of its own. You can't eat a banknote. It's accepted as a medium of exchange purely because it is authorized by the government.
Moving on to part 2, modern money and banking, and the digital shift.
Modern money isn't just that physical cash jingling around in your pocket anymore. It's totally intricately tied to the banking system. Today, our money stock heavily relies on demand deposits. That's money held in bank accounts that you can access on demand. And of course, we can't ignore the massive rise of digital transactions through things like UPI, card swipes, and net banking.
This whole system is incredibly dynamic, and the government plays a huge role in keeping it running smoothly. A perfect real-world example of this is the 2016 demonetization event in India. Almost overnight, 501,000 rupee notes were declared invalid. People had to surrender them to banks. It was a massive, sweeping shift designed to push the country toward a more digital, transparent economy and to crack down on corruption.
Okay, so how do the banks actually fit in? We'll look at them as the essential mediators. You deposit your extra money, and you earn a little interest. The bank keeps only a tiny fraction of that, usually around 15% in India, and they loan out the rest to people who need it, charging a higher interest rate. That difference, that's their profit. But it poses a pretty fascinating question. What do you think would happen if every single depositor asked for their money back at the exact same time? It's literally the ultimate stress test of the whole system.
Which brings us nicely to part 3, the two faces of credit, risk and reward. Now, credit, or taking out a loan, is basically just an agreement where a lender supplies money or goods in return for a promise of future payment. But it is definitely not a one-size-fits-all concept. Borrowing money can yield drastically different outcomes for different people. It's perfectly illustrated by the success story of a guy named Salim and the really devastating struggle of a woman named Swapna. Let's look at both.
Let's start with Salim. He's a shoe manufacturer who lands this massive order, but he just doesn't have the cash on hand to fulfill it. For Salim, credit provided vital working capital. He took out loans to buy leather, pay his workers, and boom, he delivered the order on time, made a handsome profit, and paid back the loan. In this scenario, credit was the exact stepping stone he needed to increase his production and build wealth.
But then, on the flip side, there's Swapna. She is a small farmer who took out a loan to cultivate her crops. Now, farming relies on highly unpredictable factors. When Swapna's crop failed because of a pest attack, repaying that loan became completely impossible. Even after trying to take a fresh loan the next year, the earnings just weren't enough. So instead of helping her, credit left her worse off. She was actually forced to sell a portion of her own land just to pay off the debt, plunging her into a really painful reality we call a debt trap.
Part 4. Formal vs. informal lenders. Who can you trust?
Because borrowing money carries such massive risks, literally the difference between expanding a business and losing your family's land, where the money comes from matters immensely. Look at this breakdown. In the formal sector, lenders like banks and cooperatives are strictly supervised by the Reserve Bank of India, ensuring fair practices and reasonable rates. The informal sector, though, moneylenders, traders, friends, they operate with zero supervision. They can charge completely exorbitant rates and use exploitative tactics, which leads directly into those painful debt traps we just talked about.
Knowing this, expanding formal credit isn't just a nice idea, it's an absolute necessity for a developing country. It shields vulnerable borrowers from that exploitation. Right now, a huge portion of the rural poor depends heavily on those informal sources, most because traditional banks might be physically miles away, or they require strict paperwork and collateral, stuff the poor often just don't have. Cheap and affordable credit is quite literally the bedrock of overall national development.
Finally, Part 5. Empowering the rural poor and finding a new path forward.
So, here is the big challenge. How do you bring safe, formal credit to folks in rural areas who lack the collateral traditional banks demand? Well, enter a really brilliant innovation called self-help groups, or SHGs. Here's how it works. A small group of neighbors, usually 15 to 20 people, pools their regular savings to provide manageable loans to each other. They charge a reasonable interest rate, way lower than a local moneylender. And the true genius of it? The group itself guarantees repayment. This makes traditional banks actually willing to lend to the SHG as a whole, completely bypassing the need for individual collateral. It's a game changer.
And the craziest part, these groups end up doing way more than just handing out money. Like the text says, they become the essential building blocks of rural organization. Their regular meetings create a safe platform to discuss and tackle much broader social issues, things like health, nutrition, and even domestic violence. It's this beautiful, holistic approach that empowers its members, particularly women, to become entirely self-reliant, both financially and socially. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we've seen how money evolved from solving the headache of bartering to powering our modern digital economies, and how credit has the power to either rapidly build wealth or totally destroy it. I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. If affordable credit really dictates our economic reality, what happens to the future of developing nations when we guarantee fair access to absolutely everyone? Thank you so much for exploring Chapter 3 with me, and keep questioning how the world around you actually works. Catch you next time.